Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I am one of the scholars in residence here. Welcome to Pillow Talks. These talks happen on Saturdays and occasionally on Sunday afternoons. Next week, as part of Hip Hop Across the Pillow, on Saturday, we'll be doing a pillow talk calling Hip Hop at 50, a conversation with a panel of artists about the ongoing culture of hip hop. You can find out about all the upcoming events, performances, workshops, etc. On the Pillow website or in the festival brochure. Now on to today. The title of today's talk is Celebrating Katherine Dunham. Dancer, choreographer, anthropologist, social activist, author, artistic director, creator of the Dunham technique, master teacher. In 2002, Dunham and Reginald Yates, whom I'll introduce in a moment, led a program in the school at Jacob's Pillow, and during that program session, there was a sold-out performance in the Ted Shawn Theater called A Tribute to Katherine Dunham. This past week, the school has revisited that summer with a program called The Dunham Legacy Revisited, directed by Mr. Yates. That brings us to today, a conversation among these folks about the enduring impact of Katherine Dunham on the dance world. We're going to follow a slightly different format today. In a moment, Reginald Yates will officially welcome us. Then I'm going to introduce everybody else who is up here, although I think maybe you know them all already. And let me say this. All of the introductions will be way too brief so we can hear from them rather than about them. But first, let me introduce Reginald Yates, dancer, choreographer, multidisciplinary artist, community liaison, writer, mentor, activist. Yates worked extensively with Dunham as a collaborator, facilitator, advisor, and cultural interpreter of the preservation of her legacy. Reginald, let me turn it over to you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. First and foremost, I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful to be able to be entrusted with the mantle of my ancestors. I come from 150 years of African genius. Educators, scholars, artists, entrepreneurs. My father raised me in such a way, in a sense, that whatever you've been given, especially from above, never hold it to yourself. So in essence, you become the most brilliant, the most educated, so you can simply give it away. Anytime that one is dancing in Africa, the beginning, we are giving thanks for the seen, for the unseen. And there's a distinct difference between being a dancer and being an artist. Katherine Dunham entrusted me with her vision to come to Jacob's Pillow. And on my journey in this life, I saw all of my ancestors being privileged to be in the presence of Pearl Primus. So many, Jeffrey Holder. All the photos I see on the wall. So many. And sometimes, again, as I say to so many students, for me in living in Africa and all over the world here, and to my African students that I just actually left, is that you are the answer. And many times we're looking for other things when you are the answer. And so the greatest expression of being an artist is also being able to express our humanity. So can you turn to your neighbor and say hello? And ladies and gentlemen, already you're creating miracles. And so in Africa, the dance and music is one. Gentlemen, can we play it? A little bit clap here with everybody. Spirit! Yes, you have created miracles. So in Africa, when the griot, the historian, passes away, it is as though a library has burned down. So I would be remiss if I did not recognize the ancestors that were here with us in 2002. We lost so many. Everyone please say Namu. Namu. In Bambara, it means amen. We so be it. Here, we recognize here the presence of those who have made their transition. So our latest here ancestor here is Harry Belafonte, who's also in our presence. Namu. Namu. Theo Jamison, who was so special to me, was the assistant to Katherine Dunham. We say Amu. Amu. Yes. So many. Marie Brooks, who graced the stage here. Namu. Namu. And so many. And so as we go on, we understand that Katherine Dunham left a great light and path. And actually, as I said to the students before, she carried an entire nation in her feet.
Thank you for welcoming us.
Yes.
Let me introduce the people sitting up here with me, directly here. Cleo Parker Robinson, founder, artistic director of the Denver-based artistic institution, Cleo Parker Robinson Dance. The company repertoire includes works of icons of American dance, including Katherine Dunham, Donald McHale, Elio Palmieri. The company most recently performed here last summer, and she herself performed Barrel House Blues, Dunham's work, on the tribute program in 2002. Welcome back. John Parks, dancer, teacher, director, choreographer for the concert stage, as well as for Broadway, film, and television. He has worked with many notable choreographers, way too numerous to list today, and is now a member of the dance faculty at University of South Florida. April Berry, dance director. Master teacher, dance educator, and longtime internationally acclaimed principal dancer with Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater.
Yes.
She's currently the Director of Community Engagement and Education and on the dance faculty at Kansas City Ballet. And Jalon Lambert, dancer, choreographer, assistant this week to Mr. Yates. He has a long-time relationship with Jacob's Pillow. First a student in the Men Dancers program in 1997, performed in the tribute concert in 2002, performed also with Sean Curran Dance Company and as a solo artist on the Inside Out series, so has the privilege of having performed on all three stages here at the Pillow. So I want to sort of set the stage and remind folks who want to reminisce with us or introduce also if Katherine Dunham's work is newer to us. Maybe, John, you could start us off by talking a little bit about the early years when you first came to be aware of Katherine Dunham and her work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I was first aware of Katherine Dunham, I guess, after, a little bit before she went to Paris. And that was in this, I believe in the 60s, early 70s, yes. And I had a company of my own called Movements Black Dance Repertory Theater. And I was really impressed with Katherine Dunham and the company in terms of their activism. And what they did in terms of being conscious, having a black consciousness, and also blending that awareness with artistry and creativity, and making her choreography was something that was certainly entertaining and wonderful, but it also always had a message and also taught. I also studied with her at her school on 42nd Street before she went to East St. Louis, so it was a real wonderful occasion. My ex-wife also danced with her, Trina Parks, and was in Paris as well. And so it was just a great occasion, and she was just a pinnacle of artistry and leadership and inspiration for me.
So any one of you could answer this. I'm just wondering if somebody could summarize when you just said she was an activist. Talk about, maybe Reginald, you could start with saying, what did that mean in her lifetime that she was an activist as well as an artist?
Well, she understood she could not just present steps on stage. I think that many audiences actually misconstrued her vision. She was not an entertainer at all. She's actually, again, was an anthropologist in a sense to also present an image to the world to uplift especially Black people, and also to dispel all kinds of stereotypical images, other kinds of things here. But also, she understood that she needed to holistically develop people, and also to actually even carry on her legacy as an anthropologist and an educator.
So, April, maybe you could introduce Alvin Ailey into the conversation and say something about what was the connection between Alvin Ailey and Katherine Dunham.
Well, Alvin Ailey first saw Katherine Dunham in California in a performance with her company. He was in the audience. He shared with us as dancers that he was mesmerized. He had never seen anything like that on stage before. This was Black excellence. This was cultural identity. This was anthropological study and research in visualization and music and movement on the stage. And it was incredible to him to see that for the first time with his identity in mind. So that stuck with him always, he said, always, which is what led to my working with Katherine Dunham, because he wanted to honor her in 1987 by reconstructing her works on the Ailey Company. And that was huge.
So when was the first time you yourself came to know about Dunham's work? Was it in learning the works themselves, or what was your introduction to her?
Well, actually, I learned about Katherine Dunham through Keith Lee. And Keith Lee was the first Black male dancer in American Ballet Theater, and he was one of my teachers. And so he had studied with Dunham and had danced some of her works early on in his career before he went into the ballet company. And he taught us a little bit about Dunham. I'd also worked with Marie Brooks at the Dance Theater of Harlem, where I trained also. And Marie Brooks and her Pan-African Caribbean Children's Dance Theater, she had introduced us as children to the Caribbean movement and Miss Dunham's work and her importance with the study in the Caribbean and the other countries that she worked in.
So, Reginald, how did you first come to meet Miss Dunham?
Actually, it's by spirit. I was literally summoned to her apartment.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that summoning.
I don't want to say it's personal, but it's sacred. But it is the same thing as my relationship with Cleo Parker Robinson. And I say by spirit because we looked at each other as to say, I know you. Because many people who really understood Katherine Dunham and actually even met her for the first time would often say she would see beyond the physical when she looked at you. And she would always give me these messages in my ear about certain kinds of things that she picked up, in a sense. But our relationship was born of spirit completely.
So, Jelon, I want to get you to say something about, so in 2002 on the tribute concert, which is playing in the reading room if you want to watch all of this Black excellence in motion on video, tell us a little bit about how it was to be performing her work in that concert in 2002, and what you as a younger dancer at the time, like you were coming to it from a different place.
Yes, I was coming to it from a young dancer fresh out of college. I graduated from the Juilliard School. And the solo that you're referencing is called Trees, choreographed by Mr. Reginald Yates. And it's a performance ethnography. It demonstrates how foundational Black Americans, African descendants of slavery, how their mindset is, okay, we've fallen, now we're gonna get back up and we're gonna try it again. And after a bad experience with certain women, you wipe yourself clean, you put your face together, and you're gonna step forward, you're gonna see this world, and you're gonna find a way through spirituality, recontextualizing the Bible, and spirituals. My people from Haiti, my people are from Haiti. When you asked about activism and Dunham, well, I grew up around compa. Before I had formal training starting at the age of 12, I've always had a lot of energy. Dancing came naturally in that context. And when I found dance that was organized and structured with ballet, Jose Limon Modern, Horton, I said, wow, I like this as well, because it gave me structure, gave me something to focus on. And then hearing classical music for the first time was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I can hear it, I can hear the rhythm. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the practice. We fast forward to New World School of the Arts down in Miami. One day, my sophomore year, they said, oh, we're bringing in Miss Katherine Dunham. No one contextualized her. She was just wheelchaired in, and we're all looking at her saying, who is this woman? So this also intertwines this whole anti-historical pieces and narratives and talking about the history of this country. And I think, I believe, and I know deeply, that's a crime. We got to talk about these things. Because if you continue to bury it, you're going to have bigger problems. Because people are walking around here looking like zombies, and it's unnecessary. When you can grab a child like she did in East St. Louis and give them structure with these gangs, it blew their minds to say, wow, I have a history. I got a dance, I got a song, I got theater. It's gorgeous. We've created demigods. We had mathematics. We had Egypt. Wait a minute, hold up, time out. When you can have a child sit down and get in touch with themselves and give them proper contextualization, that you can go out here in this world and do something productive. Now, that's revolutionary, and that's a possibility, and that's what she embodied. You see, through my relationship with Mr. Yates, through the West African tradition, where he taught the culture in his classroom, and when I heard that Africa's not the continent of darkness, but the continent of light, I was like, whoa, I've never heard this before. Say that again? So,
It was never in the books.
So when I was here in 2002, I had reverence for this woman, and even then I didn't know her completely. So that's what was going through my mind.
So April, you had a different experience. You had Mr. Ailey telling you, oh my goodness, oh yeah, what do you have there?
I had this. This is the program from City Center Theater, New York, The Magic of Katherine Dunham. That is me on the cover. And I had to bring it. This is from Ms. Dunham's work, Shango, and we're a mambo figure here in Shango.
So had you had been prepared to start the work by Mr. Ailey?
No. No, not at all. Like Jamal, we just came into the studio. Well, I didn't come in the studio. The company came to the studio in June of 1987 because Alvin had invited Miss Dunham. Her husband had just passed away, John Pratt, the year before. And Mr. Ailey wanted to celebrate Miss Dunham and lift her. And so this is why he wanted to this evening. I was on sabbatical. My mother had just passed away. And Alvin said, Miss Dunham wants you in the studio, April. He called me on the phone and he said, Miss Dunham wants you here. She has seen you dance before and she wants you here. So I came in and the whole Ailey company sat down on the floor. We had no introduction to her. I had known about her from before, but some of the other dancers of the Ailey company had not. And she started talking to us about life, about our responsibilities as human beings, not just as dancers, about death. I think she did that a lot for me. Transitioning into the afterlife. And she didn't even talk about her technique. She didn't talk about steps. She didn't talk about the choreography. She didn't talk about the movement. She talked about humanity, because she wanted to start there with us before we got up, because she didn't want us to dance her works. She wanted us to be her works. You were a mambo figure. You were becoming possessed in Lagya.
Yeah, Cleo, I want you to jump in here.
Yes.
Because here's what I've been thinking of, that your company holds her repertory, so your dancers in the company, they know it in a different way than her visiting New World School of the Arts or coming into Ailey. Could you first, before you tell us about how you first met her, maybe just say, how did you know that your company should hold her works in the repertory?
Well, first of all, I think I'm overwhelmed by, first of all, I haven't seen Reginald since we were sitting here. How many years ago? It's
Since 2002.
Yeah,
Yes.
so almost, yeah, so we haven't even
21
seen
years.
each other. And I haven't been with John Parks for a good while, and then my sister here, April, I did get to see her for a hot second in the lobby, Atlanta, Memphis, where were we, darling?
Dance USA conference.
Yes. So I'm taking it all in, so it's a lot. I do want to say that I met Miss Dunham, I think when I was 19 in New York. But I heard all about her growing up in Denver, Colorado. I want you to know that. My father and mother, I think I shared it with some of the students, and they were extraordinary today. I just want to say they were, they were lovely. Absolutely. Oh my God. April, I was in the restroom and I said, girl, you had only a week. She said, no, let me make it clear. We had 6 hours. So she had to clear that up for me. And so the same way with having Ray perform last night and only having a very little time doing Strange Fruit. And honey, thank you. And Winifred Harris is here with me, and been on the journey with me since she was 8. So I love that. And she's only 16 or 20, something like that right now. But it's so full for me to be able to carry her work. That's a huge honor, a huge honor. And to know that we are here elevating her. And she was, the last time I was here, I was sitting here next to her. I always look at the video that Norton did. It was beautiful. And we see Miss Dunham there, and I'm on this side, and I keep going, open the camera, open the camera, I'm there. But I know in my heart I'm there. Every time I see it, I'm there. And I know what it took to get her here. I thought she was 90, 93. But we worked very hard for her to have that, finally that moment in her life, that we would be at the most important dance festival in her life. And the question was, why did it take for her to be in her 90s to be here? So that was the huge question. It stays in my heart and my soul. But I met her really through my mother and father, who talked to me about Miss Dunham every time. Anytime she came on television, we were all sitting there and going, that's what it was like to know that as African Americans, as black people in this country, we could be excellent, we could be extraordinary, we could be beautiful, we could be everything we could possibly be. So if we didn't hear it in the community, we had to find it somewhere, and that's the way we found it. And Harry Belafonte was so important to me that when my baby brother was born, I called him Belafonte. So he's Belafonte. So when I was working with Harry, even before Julie, and Julie was the one that really helped set Southland, and I want to give thanks to Julie. She is still alive, but I've not been able to talk to her and tell her that I'm here. And I think that's important, that she knows that this legacy is being carried on here at Jacob's Pillow. And Pam, I want you to know how wonderful it was to bring my company, honey, and JR, because we've been now 53 years, longer than Miss Dunham had her company. And that's a lot of years for someone to continue to work through the beauty and the struggle of it. And knowing that her commitment to Haiti was so great. Her commitment to East St. Louis was so great. And I had to be in those places with her to understand it. And I carried that in my being. And so I didn't realize how much I was carrying it until 5 minutes ago. And I know I'm carrying it. And I'm grateful to be here.
So let me
Grateful.
just make sure that people know. Harry Belafonte's wife, Julie, was a member of Katherine Dunham's company and the piece Southland, which is one of the great activist dance works, I think, and opportunities of dance theater to really make an impact, caused some sizzle, took away some funding from the State Department because she was making provocative work. So anybody who thinks that today is the day that dancers have discovered social justice needs to go back and read about Miss Dunham's work. Could you say something? I mean, one of my first memories of you, Cleo, is in Barrel House Blues, that you dancing it with Jamal Barnes, who went on to be a member of Bill T. Jones' Arnie Zane Dance Company and have a career in addition to doing Miss Dunham's work. But could you say something about that work? I mean, I think what you said about it not being about entertainment is, on the one hand, true, but absolutely riveting entertainment as well. And I think Barrel House Blues is a great example
I
of
had
it.
a good time. I had a good time with Barrel House
I know
Blues.
it wasn't the bottom line.
No. I love it because I was able to have Miss Dunham come and coach my entire company in Barrel House Blues. That was not my part. It was not my part. But I was looking at it every day, and she never, and again, like April said, she didn't start with technique. She started philosophically, and just she would be wherever she was, because she had first done churros on the company, and Julie and Tommy Gomez came then, but this time Vanoy came, and that was wild because she had all the women, and I was not learning the part. I was the rehearsal director. I'm the artistic director. I'm going to make sure that she has everything she needs, and I'm like, you need me. I was like this. No, all these women are fabulous. They're better than I am, but I know that's my part. So anyway, so even Winifred learned it, and Marcy learned it, and they were fabulous. And Miss Dunham would say, so what do you think? And I said, no, Miss Dunham, it's your thought. And I'm going, okay, I better learn this piece, because she said to me at one point when we were after rehearsal, she said, I'm just not sure of who I'm thinking about. She hadn't chosen an answer. And I said, well, Miss Dunham, I thought maybe I would just learn. She said, sister, you haven't had hard times. I said, you don't know me. I said, wait a minute. Oh, wait. So she didn't believe I knew what that piece was about. It wasn't about whether I had the technique. She didn't think that the way I perceive, or she perceived me, was like, well, you can't be that woman. I said, well, you just don't know. So I had to show another side. I had to discover another side to project. And then I loved doing it with several partners, but Jamal was wonderful. But we had Vanoy there, and Vanoy would work with me. And he'd say, let me tell you what I said when you were doing those partners. Let me tell you what. And Thea would work with me. And so I had a lot of input. Because it's subtle movement, it was not huge. And I mean, dancers want to dance, they want to move. And she was like, no, sister, you're coming into a club in Chicago, it's cold. And she would give me the scene because she was such a director. And so it was hard to just pull myself down. And she said, and you're chewing gum. I said, I'm chewing gum during the piece? And then she said, and then you have to call her a bitch. And I go, what? She said, yes, you do. And I was thinking, oh, no, I couldn't do that. And Theo says, Miss Dunham said, that's what you have to do. Yep, the sister who's on the stool. And so I went, I can't do that. That's one of my dancers. It's like it was one of my dancers. And that was, of course, Marceline Freeman, who played the first role there. And so I always am honored to do it. But it's getting that right leg up is, and then the men in the hinge. That goes on,
but I'm glad
you know.
you're saying that about the hinge, because all of you are in agreement that she's not about technique. She's about the history, the spirit, the story behind it. But there is a Katherine Dunham technique. So Reginald, maybe say something about what the technique
I would
is.
say again too, she was very, very clear. But I'm going to start with April Berry to talk about that, since she was actually the first Alvin Ailey dancer to be certified personally and as a master teacher. So if you would allow me, I would like Miss Berry to.
Thank you, Reginald.
Yes.
Well, the Dunham technique was reconstructed, recreated each decade. Let me just start there. So there are many camps of Dunham technique in this country. There's a camp in California, there's a camp in East St. Louis, there's a camp in New York, there's a camp in Chicago, and all of us learn the Dunham technique differently based on when Miss Dunham came to those cities and worked with those dancers. When she came to New York to work with the Ailey Company in the 80s, she reconstructed and recreated her technique on us again, because we were a different kind of dancer than the one she was working with her company in the 40s, and different than the East St. Louis dancers from the community there. She was in New York with dancers that had a lot of training, let's just put it that way. We came from ballet world, we came from the modern dance world, trained in Horton Gray and ballet. So she looked at us and said, okay, let me see what I can do on these bodies. And so she brought one dancer with her from East St. Louis, Michael Green, and he was the demonstrator. And we learned Dunham technique in 6 weeks to go on the stage at City Center with all the choreography of 13 works from all of her different decades of choreography, along with the centerpiece of that Martinican ballet, Lagya. So it was a lot of material and a lot of technique to work. But the Dunham technique is a fusion of ballet, which Miss Dunham loved ballet. She started with Ludmila Speranzova in Chicago with her own training. And so she loved ballet. Obviously, it's a fusion of modern dance, and obviously it's a fusion of African and Caribbean cultural dance forms and movements. So she explained that to us before we started. She said, but I have modeled my technique after the ballet. And this is why I'm in the ballet now. It's part of my legacy with Miss Dunham, to be in the ballet, teaching Dunham technique at a ballet studio and company. So we start with a bar, Dunham technique bar. We go to the center floor. You can start from the floor, but Miss Dunham said, a lot of modern techniques start from the floor. I want to start mine standing in the center or at the bar. So that's how she started. Bar, center, across the floor progressions, which are the diagonals in ballet.
So I love what you're...
I want to say something
go ahead.
about, it's interesting to hear this because I started studying Dunham technique at 12.
Oh, nice.
And it was a circuitous route because I started studying with Sevilla Fort. And she was Katherine Dunham's ballet mistress for a number of years. And it was, so that's how my entree into the Dunham technique started. Katherine Dunham was basically in Europe and performing outside of the country. She was a superstar in every place but the United States. So I didn't see too much of her except for, when they would occasionally come in and also on video from time to time. But the spirit of Katherine Dunham was through Sevilla. In as much as, and it's interesting that the things that I'm hearing you say about her in terms of how she didn't go directly towards the technique. She, it was about who you are as a person. And I was deeply influenced as being 12 years old at the bar taking ballet, and then going across the floor doing yanvalus. And second position pliés, and it was really a wonderful entree into what dance was and what dance is. And when I also went to high school performing arts, and when I got there, I just was able to kind of just breeze right on through it. PA, right? It's another college alumni from PA. I was able to really kind of just breeze through it, and it's because of the training that I had doing the Dunham technique through Sevilla.
You want to add to that, Cleo?
Well, I think her technique is so vast, and I think that's the hard part, that it's not being taught in the universities and colleges and so on. It's not being passed on. And I think when I'm auditioning a dancer now, they sometimes are missing something really, really powerful. One, that confidence to be whoever they are. Right, so I can see them. I don't want to see the technique. I don't want to see the leg. I don't want to see the split. I don't want to see the jeté. Of course, I want to see all that. Yes. But I want to see beyond that. And Miss Dunham would allow you to have all those dimensions. She would bring that out. She would train that, like I'm seeing here. The drums were very important, and so I love the drummers, and they were fantastic last night and today. But I think that's it. So in ballet is so European, and it is what we learn, and it is extraordinary. My teacher was Rita Berger, and Rita was with the Met. And so when I came to her, I'd already studied ballet, but I was following Miss Dunham as an anthropologist because I was interested in all of those other things because, first of all, being a dancer wasn't a very respectful thing. And since my father thought he was Paul Robeson, that wasn't going to be what I was going to do. I mean, all black folks can dance. Why would you do that? I mean, that was the thought. I mean, you know what I mean? Everybody can dance. What are you really going to do? So I thought, yeah, where are you going to get the job? What skills are you going to have?
Exactly.
So I think that she was really clear about you will have all kinds of skills, and you will develop your mind, you'll develop your spirit.
Miss Dunham had
Oh,
had that.
yes, Miss Dunham, you would develop all of that.
Well, overall, we have to understand it's completely holistic. And that is what's missing in the dance world today.
So I think, April, you've done a great job of reminding dance historians in the room that she wasn't fixed. Like, she didn't decide something at 30 and then stick to it. That she, depending on the people whom she was teaching, where her own career, her own dancing, her own interests as an artist, her own research as a scholar, so that the technique could also change.
Yes.
So Reginald, maybe you could say something about then. So what does it mean today when you're working with a group of students who maybe have been trained in Dunham technique or maybe have not? What does it mean today to allow for that flexibility and aliveness that she wanted in her work at the same time as protecting and preserving her legacy?
Well, every generation has certain needs. And what you needed yesterday, you may not need today. And she was acutely aware of that. And we must understand that when Ms. Dunham taught, she was even changing and doing and re-choreographing because she was ever evolving. She was extremely progressive. And so we like to say that Dunham is a way of life. Yes, exactly. And that was always her statement. And what is missing, again, too, in the dance world, we don't look at artists, unfortunately, as whole people. From the African tradition, the human being is before the artist. The life before the art.
But also the Dunham technique was based on theoretical models, form and function, intercultural communication, socialization through the art form. So you have that foundation, that research foundation to work up from to the technique.
So what I'm hearing you say is that people who, if somebody comes in off the street and wants to learn Dunham technique, they're not just going to learn the steps or the action today, right? So that's an important part of the legacy.
The philosophy is very important in the theoretical theories that she infused in her work.
Well, we have to understand, too, in the early school, imagine she had Arthur Mitchell and Margaret Mead.
Yeah, the other...
In the same space.
Anthropologists. Oh, that's wonderful.
Brilliant. And so in my own research, I got the first curriculum for the Dunham School. And that's what you saw. I know that you wanted to expound more about my relationship with Miss Dunham, but I want to say this, though. We never spoke about dance. Never. 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 It was always about life.
That would be my experience as well, because I was so inspired by what Miss Dunham did with the gangs that I would sit with her for hours, and I was talking about my time with her, which was really
So you're talking about when she's
time.
in East St. Louis.
Yes, East St. Louis, because when I was in New York, I was with her dancers, teaching mostly. And then I was at Sevilla Fort's celebration, because I was working with the Black Theater Alliance at that time in New York. But it was wonderful to see how Miss Dunham had really influenced not just dancers, but all kinds of folks. I mean, and her school was one that I then modeled my school in the very beginning. that way, where it was really, I mean, I had yoga and I had, street dance, whatever, I mean, everything. But she did languages and she did nutrition, and she was way beyond her time. I mean, she was just really phenomenal. It was really, really something.
It was
John.
really incredible. It was really incredible. She, I mean, if you may not know these names, but Marlon Brando was her student. Yes. Jimmy Dean, James Dean. Yes. Sal Mineo these were all actors that studied dance, but they studied philosophy. Yes. Katherine Dunham was an anthropologist. So she understood the study of movement and the study of history and the study of archivalness, and so it was, and in the school, her school, it wasn't just dance. It was, you learned French, you learned the language. The women learned etiquette, how to set a table, how to greet someone. It was holistic is a total thing. Yeah.
And to be certified, you had to do your field work, your field research in a country. You didn't become certified unless you did that.
I mean, because that's her own background, right? That she had,
exactly.
right? That exactly an important continuation of that. That it doesn't just stay in the studio or on stage; it goes out.
I wanted to just speak to the gangs, because I think I spoke about devotion yesterday, that I know about. Miss Dunham taught me devotion, dedication to something that you believe in, that is beyond you, that's bigger than you. But to be devoted to it is what I mean, that kind of commitment. And I think that might be good for young people, and they're trying to figure out where to go and not to be lost and all of that. But to stay with something long enough that you can see how you've affected it, how you have actually affected change. And I think that's what I'm so grateful that I can see that in my own circle, that I can see someone evolve, that I will go through our changes and evolution, and I can watch them continue to become. I mean, I have to say with Winifred, when she started with me at 8, and I'm looking at her as this woman, I go, she's a phenomenal woman. I mean, a phenomenal woman. And I know I had a little bit of something to do with it, but how great it is if we can be in each other's lives and watch that growth. And I think that's the joy we had. It's like a class that you watch, but it happens like that, where you're really watching that happen. You're part of that. But when she began to work with gangs in East St. Louis, and I remember talking to those who were not in dance class, like Robert Lee, and he said, she changed my life, and I will be forever grateful to her. And he said, I don't need to take a picture with her. I don't need anybody to know my name. I don't need any of that. I just have to make sure that Miss Dunham is okay. That what she needs is what's going to happen here. So she needed to make sure that people respected that community, even if they did not have the resources of St. Louis. She was dedicated to that. Now, so then when she began to work with gangs, and I began to work with gangs, and there I had the Crips and the Bloods and Skinheads, and I had them all together in the studio. And I would then sit with Miss Dunham, and at 9 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd be talking. I said, Miss Dunham, I think they need to do the chakra work. Because, I mean, I think if we start with the first chakra, and she looked at me and she said, sister, that's not going to work. You cannot start with the chakras. So I'm going to the technique, right? And she's saying, no, you can't start there. And so I mean, we had a very successful, I called it Project Self-Discovery, where we were honored at the White House. But it was because I listened to her. I listened to her guide me through what do we do with these young people who are looking for something in life to find themselves. And they can find it in themselves through the music or the dance or the drumming or just coming together in the most creative way. Find the power of that. So that was it.
So can I ask you, April, to say something? I mean, you already had great success with the Alvin Ailey Company, and then you met Miss Dunham. What was it that made you know, I want to get certified. What was the thing that made you commit to that next?
And I was the only Ellie Company member that got certified. I was surprised to find out. Well, first of all, my mother's Jamaican from the West Indies. So I had Jamaican heritage from the West Indies through my mother. And so when I met Miss Dunham in the studio, she asked me this question, what were you raised in? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, what religion did your family raise you in? And I said, I was raised Presbyterian as a Protestant in Protestant church. Oh no, she said. That's the first thing she said. No. And I just looked at her. I was 27 when I met her. So, she was bigger than life. She was coming off history pages to us. So we were like, and she said, you have to go back to your roots. Have you visited your family in Jamaica? Have you done research with the Maroon people in Jamaica? Have you done this in Jamaica? And I said, no, and no. And so that's where it started, for me. She put the bug in my ear that I'm not on foundational ground and I need to go find it. And that became the impetus for me to get certified.
We have time for a couple of questions or comments, and I'm going to repeat them so everybody can hear. Yes. So this woman also had the opportunity to study 2 summers in a row in East St. Louis at a Dunham workshop, and so a combination of both her dancers and Miss Dunham herself, and your own dancing.
Well, I just need to say, Miss Dunham made a lot of connections for all of us. And the connections spanned from the ballet world to the modern dance world to the jazz dance world to the African dance world to the Caribbean dance world. And I just discovered that when I was at Kansas City Ballet, that Todd Bolander, who was the former artistic director of Kansas City Ballet, actually taught ballet in Katherine Dunham's school in New York in the 1940s, in the Katherine Dunham School of Arts and Research. He's a male ballet teacher, and Sevilla was the female ballet teacher. And so, that was an amazing revelation because it was like full circle for me, going back to Kansas City, which is the second home of the Ailey Company as well. So I want to make that, the connections are huge. Julie Belafonte, Cleo talked about. I mean, there's 3 people in the world that have done Lagya, the role of Lulus, as Cleo knows. That's Miss Dunham, Julie Belafonte, and myself. And when we did that, I had no understudy for the Magic of Catherine, for Lulus, the central figure in Lagya. And I have to say that because it's really important to say that because Miss Dunham cast her roles that she used to dance in her company on other companies like Ailey when she came in a particular way. She didn't look at your technique. She didn't want to know if I'd studied Dunham technique. She looked at you, and she looked through you and into you to see what your persona is about. And I always asked her, why did you pick me to do Lulus? Lagya was one of her treasured ballets. The pictures that you see of her are always in Lagya, most of them. So she loved that role because it fused everything she loved. So it was theatrical. It was theatricalized about Martinican folklore. But that particular Agya, the fight, Agya means the fight in Creole culture in Martinique, the centerpiece of that ballet is a possession scene, right? And so she said, April, it was your sweetness that I saw when I saw you in the studio. It was your vulnerability. It was your openness that I knew you would become a good Lulus.
Can I ask you to follow up on that just by saying, how do you transmit that in your own teaching today to when people
with them, those students? We did it today.
He has that question.
Yeah. So this is a comment that you were first introduced to Dunham technique through the teacher Joan Peters, and that she had a tremendous influence in the Ailey School as well.
She was a former Ailey dancer.
She started very young at 4, thinking about Katherine Dunham. Oh yes, that's what she talks about. Yes, and I think there was a question.
I'm not going to try to repeat it at all, but I'm going to say that an important thing to note is that that oftentimes people who are introduced to white European and European American concert dance forms miss out on an entire legacy of black concert dance and black dance in the United States, especially in university settings. And so that it helps foundation. What did you say the word of foundation before, and how important that is?
I would also say that it's and they miss out on the contribution that black dance or has made in terms of world dance. You know, I mean, we are dance is a language. Dance is like Swahili or Spanish or Creole. It's a language. It tells us. It communicates to us, but it doesn't tell us what to say.
And ballet is not just a European aesthetic; it's also an African
aesthetic as well.
We have ballet in Africa. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, no, go ahead. And then I have to say a little something about this wild woman right there.
I think what it boils down to is respect. Because when you walk into a university and you see a black name that has a technique that this master spent years codifying it, and then you walk in and you like, whoa, this is structured, and you may not even know that terminology, and you're like, wow, it moves forward, it's evolving, it goes through it goes through a plie and the emphasis of the pelvis, okay, and it has to be precise, and then you're like, oh, there's this thing called progression, and it has a black context. Oh, I'm learning about people that I didn't know about. And when a university, accredited university or college, puts that name down, me being a person of color, walk in, I'm like, wow, respect. That's the bottom line. It's just like, wow, respect.
Clue, you had something to say, and then I have a question over here.
Go with the question, then I can hold on to this thought. I can hold on to it.
So here's an observation that it was 2002 that Dunham was first here, and the program in the school led by Reginald and Miss Dunham, and now it's 20 some odd years later, and thank goodness you're back. But what about keeping it more presence, not just here at the Pillow, but in other dance centers? What contributions? And I think this is a great way for us to round out the conversation publicly, and then we'll have, I think, more informal conversation. But how do we keep this moving forward?
Well, let's start with the history. 2002 represented the celebration of Miss Dunham's illustrious career. 2023, with her passing, now we have what is called a template, a path, a light. With a new generation, please wave your hands. I said my children, yes.
Ah, yes.
So, for me, 2023 represents a call for action. And so that means, too, is that we need everyone to put the resources in place so that we can continue this. Because it's life. It's life. A tendu doesn't call everybody. And sometimes an arabesque is not sufficient. Sometimes the ancestors are saying this. And that's the beauty, celebrating all people and recognizing them. Many times people drop out of this here. And I say to the students all the time, I don't want to lose anyone.
Yeah.
But many times they drop out because nothing affirms them. And the dance did not come into existence. Even classical ballet started with what? The people. The people. The village. So we have to put that in place. I want to invoke Maya Angelou. Says this, what? When you get, you give. Disperse the resources. Yes?
Yes.
If I have $1, you have 50 cents.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
Toni Morrison. Yes, yes. When you learn, you teach. And that was Miss Dunham. She didn't want this to just be in the hollowed walls of academia, but to go out and transform the world.
In each environment, community
Yes, absolutely.
centers,
Yes, absolutely.
studios, ballet studios,
Yes.
dance studios. Yeah.
Her work could not be contained within the four walls. Nothing.
You got one more thing to say. I can feel it. Here it is.
That felt like a period on that. That was just.
You give us a coda.
It's so profound. Well, you know, I have to say this. I was named after my cousin, Anne Henry. And when I began to do Miss Dunham's work for many, many years, I never met my cousin, Anne Henry. And she said to me, Cleo, you know, it's taken you years to seek me out. And yet I was named after her, you know. And I said, well, I want to, she said, you focus so much on Katherine Dunham, but you have not done anything about my life. And I was like, whoa. And I said, but I haven't read anything. I've never seen anything about you, you see, Anne Henry. And Joan Myers-Brown says, girl, Anne Henry was bad in Chicago. She did, and so I thought she was an Apollo dancer. She said, no, I was at Jacob's Pillow. I was here. And there's no history. But I want to thank Norton for really staying with the history. He was not here when she was here. Unless, I don't know how old he is. I'm not going to ask that. But I knew what it did for me is to say, everybody has a job. Everybody has a job to make sure that the history is vast, deep and fast, and that our cultures are so magnificent, how rich we would feel every day if we really were able to contribute and receive all of that's there. And when I sat here, I thought a number of things. I thought about Donna McHale, who was here. So I loved John Parks because he was the first male dancer I really loved. So I really liked him. But good Lord put him right here because when I would go to Connecticut, my husband, who was not a dancer, he was an athlete, when he saw John Parks dance, because he was a football player, basketball, when he saw John Parks, he said, now that's an athlete. And I was like, you never, that's what we do, you know. But we followed the Ailey Company from the early, from Connecticut on. And I knew that I wanted men in my community to see the power. That's why I focused so much on the men. I wanted them to have role models. So I always brought in extraordinary men that could become role models for other men because there were not enough systems in our culture that were developing that for men or women of color, period. So I knew I had a job, and the job is not over. But I do think that Jacob's Pillow has made a tremendous commitment in the last few years. I can't speak for the first, I don't know how many years
91.
prior, 91 years. But I do think that we have to stand like any politician. We have to be always aware of what people need. And what I watched last summer and I watched this summer, and it was 20 years since I was invited back. And I thought, God, Lord, I'm 75. How long do you think it's going to take to do this? I was fighting for Miss Dunham, and then I went, well, wait, 53 years is a lot of years, and my archives of Miss Dunham are extraordinary. My archives of Tally Beatty are extraordinary. Alvin Ailey's. I was there when she was auditioning for that part in Alvin's studio. I was rehearsing in the other studio, and I watched how the Dunham company felt so challenged by Alvin's company because they had not done the Dunham technique. They were not Dunham dancers. And I saw that, and I was like, whoa, that was my lesson. Okay, we better get some Dunham technique. But I didn't make that connection until later when I brought when Alvin died, and I was honoring Alvin Ailey, Alvin Ailey, Katherine Dunham, Dr. Pearl Primus, and Arthur Mitchell. I wanted those four legends to be together because they always get pitted against each other or confused. So I wanted them to come together and to be seen in their own light. And Alvin died just a little bit right before
that,
less
yeah.
than a month. And when April came in and danced Lagia, she was very different than where she was in the studio. She had just exploded as an artist. And I got to be there in the room with Miss Dunham to watch her coached in a little hotel room with no room. You don't have to be in the studio, but to watch the magic. I watched the magic of Katherine Dunham in New York, but I watched the Katherine Dunham magic, and because you are ready to receive. And that's what I have to say. I think Miss Dunham wanted us to do. Be ready to receive. Be ready to receive the beauty that exists around us, and know it comes in every shape and color and experience, and to be ready to receive it.
So
And
there's
that's
the
what I feel.
present, the past, and maybe the future as well. So thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you for being here.